Ronit Vida, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us. So happy to be here.
Yes, I mean our paths have crossed in other lifetimes, right? But this is long overdue. I'm excited to have you on the show.
Thanks.
So
We're so excited to be here.
we were talking. We met briefly in 2019 when I was doing Goop Fellas with Seamus and Gwyneth, and it seems like a different time, right? I mean, so much has happened since then.
So much has happened and a ton has happened for us. And so right after we met, around the time that we met, I was working with Dr. Mark Hyman, and I worked with him for 4 years, overseeing his private practice operations, brand, worked on the Dr. Hyman business, launched a couple of his books, and about, in early 2020, I had a miscarriage while I was doing his book launch, Food Fix. And when you work in the functional medicine space and you do all of the things, which we know what all the things are and we can go into them,
Yeah.
um, it's pretty shocking to have a miscarriage because you think that you're super healthy, and like it literally came to me out of left field. And when I started to do the research on why miscarriages happen and ask that question of my doctor, as we do in the functional medicine space, like, how can I optimize? What could I do better? What are ways that women can have healthier pregnancies?
Hmm.
I just got dismissed, and the answers that I got from my doctor was, there's nothing you could do. It's just common. It's your age. Just keep trying.
Hmm. Well, and isn't that, I mean, I'm so glad that you brought this up because there's so many people, I mean, most the people that listen to the podcast, they're doing so much more for their health than the average person out there. So it's doubly, triply as deflating and disheartening when maybe it's miscarriage or maybe it's a health setback another way where they feel like, wow, like what am I doing wrong? But sometimes, sometimes we have the answers, and sometimes it's the things we haven't looked at, right? Certainly, but then it doesn't do like it's easier said than done, but to not like beat yourself up or shame yourself like you're not doing enough. I mean, can you speak on that at all?
I think it's very easy to go down, especially after pregnancy loss, to go down a very deep self-blame, guilt. I
Yes.
had two losses. My second one was a week apart from Ronit, and that's kind of where our journey began. But I would say after the first one, I literally went this shameful rabbit hole of everything I had ever ate, done, worked out.
Yes.
And unfortunately, a lot of women carry that same burden of like blaming themselves. And really, why we started this brand was simply when Ronit called me. And after doing so much research, because we weren't willing to just accept the dismissive answers and we wanted to know more and we wanted to do more, we weren't willing to try again unless truly we could put our best foot forward.
Yeah.
She called me with the research about men's health being 50% of pregnancy loss and pregnancy health. And while it's so intuitive and such a duh moment,
Mm-hmm.
it was mind blowing and shocking to me. I had goosebumps the day she called me. It never dawned on me with both my losses that my partner could have been at all the reason. And our OBGYNs never told us. And so, really, that aha that it set off is just that whether it is your own health issue or loss, we want people to really shed the optimism and opportunity to look deeper and see what you can do. And listen, we are living in a more toxic world. There are things we cannot control, but we're trying to focus on what is within our control. And
Yes.
that's really where our journey started.
Right, right. You don't have to necessarily have it all figured out, but there's
Right.
oftentimes some missing pieces. Yes, you're doing better than most people. And I would say and I say this to telehealth patients all the time, like things could you imagine if you weren't doing the things you're doing?
Exactly.
It's not that what you're doing is in vain. It's just yes, the world we're up against bigger challenges in our world today, and we'll get into that. We'll get into that. Before we jump into the fertility crisis as a society, how did you two get connected? How long have you known each other?
Almost 20 years, close to.
Wow. So we're
Yes.
just like lifelong friends for the past 2 decades. I mean, what was the
Lifelong
genesis?
friends. We met in our corporate careers at Nike. We were both in marketing and, did all the things together that young girls do in their 20s and 30s. And we actually got married around the same time. And we always knew that we wanted to work together, and we thought that we would somehow get into like some sort of marketing company, brand, events. And then when we both had our miscarriage a week apart, we kind of got our lives mission handed to us when we learned about just kind of the importance of nutrients and fertility and the importance of men. And we're like, okay, we have to do this. And that's kind
Mhm.
of how WeNatal was created.
Amazing. So let's set the stage, I guess, so people can know what's the state of affairs right now. What are the key factors, the most important factors of why we are facing such an epidemic rise of fertility issues? And maybe what are the most accurate numbers? And some people, when you talk about the rise of certain health issues or challenges that people have, people will say, well, it's just because we're hearing about it more. And it's not that, right? We're not just hearing about it more. It's not just better diagnosis. People are experiencing these things more. Can you explain what's going on?
Definitely. We had our own personal journey here. And but then when we started to see what was really taking place from a global perspective, we realized that we're in a global fertility crisis. And plain and simple, fertility has declined 50% in the last 50 years. And we can break that down for you. But basically, from a high level, when Vida and I started to work on WeNatal 4 years ago, 1 in 8 couples were experiencing infertility, and now the CDC is reporting 1 in 5. And so, definitely something is happening. We can go into birth rates. So, in general, um, when we look at birth rates, 60 years ago, on average, globally, people were having 5.3 children. Now women are having 2.3 children. And of course, there's some sort of societal factors that are happening here, right?
Yeah.
The women have gotten access to birth control, they're having kids later in life. Maybe people are choosing to have less kids. But there are some places where but fertility factors into it. And there are some places, like for instance, Korea, women are having on average zero point 0.8 kids. So what does that mean? That means that the population is shrinking, because if two people are creating zero point 0.8 children on average,
Hmm.
that means your population is shrinking. And in the US, we're at 1.7. So again, that means that in the US, our population is shrinking and we are below the replacement rate. And when the population is shrinking, that creates a whole slew of socioeconomic factors.
Hmm.
And we can have a whole podcast about that.
Hmm.
But we're seeing that. So those are just like the overall stats. But then we can get into male fertility.
Yeah. So you mentioned that not even being talked about, right? When with your both of your individual journeys, but yeah, it's right. It's like that. Well, yeah, of course. Why isn't this talked more about?
Why isn't this talked
Yeah.
about? And also, men have this incredible ability to regenerate sperm. It's through a process called spermatogenesis. So there's actually a lot that men can do, because their sperm is constantly regenerating in a cycle every 3 months. But when we look at the global sperm counts, we know that men today have 50% less sperm compared to their grandfathers.
Hmm.
So if you think about sperm counts, since the 70s, they've dropped about 62%. And each year, they've been dropping 1% consistently.
Yeah.
Since the year 2000, that rate has accelerated to 2.6. And there are some people out there that are saying that if this continues, if this trend continues, and this is just like a math equation, sperm counts can reach zero by 2045, which is essentially around the corner.
Mm.
That alone, like we could be an endangered species, but yet no one's really talking about it. We hear a lot in our like growing up about global warming and extinct animals that we should protect. But what about the human being? Like
Yeah.
it's wild to me that this is not more heavily discussed as we're growing up. And so we're here to say it's important that no matter if you're trying to conceive, if you're a grandparent, whoever is listening to this podcast right now, we all have a role to play. And if we care about, our species really growing and thriving, it's
Hmm.
a lot of our, there's a lot of things we can all do and spread this message.
Yeah. Oh, so true. So, what about women's health? What are they experiencing right now when it
So
comes to fertility?
we see a similar decline in women's fertility. Women today in their 20s are less fertile than their grandmothers when they were 35. And we see this decline in fertility. We see this 1% effect on both men and women. So in men, we're seeing a 1% decline in annual decline on average of sperm counts. We're seeing an increase in erectile dysfunction, a decrease in testosterone, an increase in testicular cancer. And in women, we're seeing an increase in miscarriage rates in the same rate of what we're seeing in men's. And so, it's interesting to just think about what's happening. And I don't think that it's its own issue. It's part of what we're seeing in general health. It's part of what we're seeing with the obesity epidemic, with how plastics are affecting us generally in our health.
Hmm.
I would say fertility is a subset of what we're seeing across the board with
Hmm.
how we're seeing disease rise.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when you look at such a staggering number, like the statistics you've given, which are just mind boggling to conceptualize and to really think about, like a 50% drop in fertility since the 70s, or like what's the time frame that we've seen a 50% drop in fertility?
Since the 70s.
Yeah. Yeah, staggering. So this is not a matter of like better diagnostics. This is birth rate. The numbers speak for themselves. I mean, you mentioned South Korea. I know recently South Korea shut down their international adoptions in part, I'm assuming, because of this low birth rate. Like they can't lose people in their country because they're already losing people in their country. So are you familiar with that? Like these different nation states are shutting down international
Oh,
adoptions because of this low birth
yeah.
rate.
We've read articles about countries incentivizing young families to have sex, to have babies. I mean,
Yeah.
there's cash bonuses and stipends. I mean, what it's coming to is alarming because outside of like, the people that are choosing or maybe having kids later in life, there's a whole bunch of people who want to have kids and are struggling. Back to like that 1 in 5 now. It's quickly alarming how many people are struggling with infertility. And that's again the message that we want to, like, that's our community. That's who we want to help. Because if you want to have a child, but yet
Yeah.
don't know what to do or are having trouble, there's so much you can do.
Yeah. So, and then not to digress too much, but then you think of the geopolitical philosophies that people have about. And you'll hear people even today, but when you have the conversations around climate change, they'll say, well, the world's too crowded. The world's too crowded. And they are actually advocates for depopulation or slowing the
Yes.
birth rate. What's the juxtaposition of that worldview versus what we're seeing on a health actually things are dropping. What's your take on that?
I mean, the depopulation is legitimately happening.
Yeah,
And
it's
in
happening
fact,
already.
some researchers say that the decline in fertility is happening faster than global warming. And so we need to address this issue as a society. And it's a big deal. And you could see countries like Italy are having low birth weight rates, pretty much all countries in Asia, the US. And right now, the only solution that's really being talked about in the kind of media is
IVF.
assisted reproductive technology.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think there's a time and a place, which
certainly.
includes IVF, IUI, but it's also a $20 billion industry. It's a huge industry with a lot of people that profit from it. And we're here to say that's not the only solution and that there is so much that people could do to optimize their fertility and in turn optimize their health and in turn optimize their fertility. Because when something is going on with your egg quality or with your sperm quality, it's a biomarker of your health. And what couples need to understand is if they are experiencing fertility challenges, it's actually their body telling them, okay, let's look under the hood and see what's going on. And what's happening nowadays is a lot of couples, and specifically men, are bypassing that opportunity because all they need is that one sperm if they go to IVF. So they just get that one sperm and they're done. They don't look at their own issues. And a lot of these issues could be the root of or early signs of cardiovascular disease, of diabetes. And so it's kind of like IVF is a great solution, and it's but it could possibly be the worst thing that has happened to men's health.
Right, because we're not addressing the elephant in the room, right? We're bypassing evolution in a way where you think and if you see this through an evolutionary lens, which I'm sure many people in the health nutrition space, if you really think about it, it is this infertility crisis is this check engine light, like you said, what's underneath that proverbial hood. It is nature's way of saying, slow down. We actually don't want you to produce because you're so unwell, and your offspring are going to be unwell too because of this, what researchers call this epigenetic genetic mismatch, this evolutionary mismatch. So instead of addressing why there's such a massive chasm between genetics and epigenetics, we're bypassing evolution and saying, nope, let's do it this way, which again, like you're saying, I'm not shaming anybody that uses IVF or any other means like this, but it should be at least a both and conversation, right? We're living in this messed up world. Like, what can we do to at least like close the gap a bit between our world and our genome, our biochemistry, and the world around us, right?
And everything we recommend, from diet, from lifestyle, from supplementation, will only improve your chances and help if you decide to go down assisted reproductive technologies. And so what we're here to say is, like, do the work. Let's not fast forward arguably one of the most important times of your life, this golden window of opportunity, which is, some people call it trimester zero, or this preconception timeframe, is truly you and your partner's chance to build the lifelong health of yourselves, and in addition that you're going to pass off to your offspring. And so we know a lot of people, because, you know, us included, are having kids later in life. We feel the rush, the fear mongering, the pressure that we're already too old. And therefore, once we decide we're ready to have kids, it feels like we had to do it yesterday. But really taking that 3 to 6 months to optimize you and your husband or partner's health is really, I think, the biggest gift and the biggest message that we want to share with your audience, because it is a huge opportunity. And no matter which route you choose, it will help you. I think the success rate of IVF is about 30%. So again, it's a lot,
which means the failure rate is 70%. So that's like a big wow.
Right. And if you're putting your body through that, and monetarily, we know it's difficult and all that, we want to put our best foot forward no matter which route we take.
Yeah.
And so that's where a lot of these recommendations are going to come into play.
Right. Which, again, not harping on intervention when people need it or want it, but it's at the same time, it's like, okay, we try our best to play God and bypass biochemistry and evolution, but the reality is, like, that's why there's a 70% failure rate, because it's like we're up against such an insurmountable mountain, and what can we do to decrease that mismatch again? So we touched on some of these things, like environmental toxins, you mentioned plastics, like what. I know this is multifaceted and it's not just one thing, but what does the research show? What are the main reasons why we're facing such a rise of fertility issues?
Yeah, it is multifaceted. And I'd say it probably boils down to 3 big topics. One is the environment, which we mentioned. We're living in this forever toxic soup of chemicals, and that's all affecting our fertility and our men's fertility, women's fertility, and everyone. It's also about what we're putting into our bodies. And so when you think about diet, nutrition, supplementation, movement is a part of that. We're more sedentary than we've ever been. We're at desks longer, and we're meant to be outside, getting fresh air in nature, moving our bodies. And so, diet, nutrition, and movement is a huge part of it. And then really, I think the biggest elephant in the room that no one wants to address is stress. We are in an era that is like the most stress we've probably ever experienced, from social media to the careers and all the things that are playing into our always on mentality. We're on screens later at night, therefore we're not sleeping well. And sleep is probably one of the things, my most passionate topics. I had major sleep issues, and by investing in your sleep, you're literally investing in the foundation of your health, your immune system. And because we're all staying up later and on screens longer, we're disrupting like our natural circadian rhythms and whatnot. And so I think
Yeah.
it boils down to those three at a high level, and then we can go deeper on each
Yeah.
one.
Yeah, let's go into that. Like, what are like specific maybe products that people are using, things that maybe are everyday stuff that have been shown to be fertility blockers?
Yes.
Totally. So from an environmental toxin perspective, the BPAs, the forever chemicals that we're seeing in products. So BPAs are typically found in, and phthalates and BPAs, which are found in plastics. They're found in processed foods. They're found in packaging. Receipts are very high in BPA. I will
Yep.
never touch a receipt, and
I
I'm the type
grabbed it. I grabbed a Target receipt the other day, and my wife said, "Get that out of your hand." I was like, "This is what I do for a living," and she's already telling me to.
Oh my gosh,
Yeah.
good for her. And honestly, I'm the type of person that like when I go to Costco, I'm like telling the lady at Costco, like you should wear gloves if you're touching receipts all day
Seriously,
long.
all the people at registers, it's so true.
Should.
It's just so terrible, but we know that it's a thing. And if your audience wants to really geek out on the impacts of phthalates and bisphenols on fertility, they should read Dr. Shauna Swan's book. She has a book called Countdown, where she literally looks at the rise of these plastics in our society and environment and the decline in sperm counts. And by the way, we're seeing the same thing in dogs, the decline. So we're seeing the same thing in animals and in dogs. So it's not just our humans. And these dogs are living in our households. So that's kind of how we know that it has to be something in our environments. We know that microplastics have been found in 100% of men's semen samples. So
Hmm.
just being mindful of the plastics in our environment. And when we talk about the swaps that you can make, it doesn't have to happen overnight, but they should happen one by one, like getting rid of your plastic containers in your kitchen, not using Teflon pans, trying to buy more glass and stainless steel. And even like taking the lid off of your coffee when you're ordering coffee out, and not kind of anything warm inside of plastic is not good.
Hmm.
Not microwaving your food, if you have a microwave, in plastic, etc. So that's from like an environmental perspective. And of course, we also know that there's endocrine disrupting chemicals in our beauty products.
Hmm.
And I would say back in the day when I was trying to conceive my first, this was like 9 years ago, it was a downgrade to get like clean beauty and the cleaning products from your house. But nowadays it's so easy. I feel like there's so many amazing brands out there. So just being mindful of that, downloading the EWG app or Think Dirty, and
Hmm.
scanning your products, being more aware as you run out of your mascara, can you get a better version? And just having just that mindset of doing these swaps slowly. And that's why, I would say like it's never too early to start thinking about having children and preconception, because these things take time. You
Yeah.
can't just like change your behavior overnight. It takes time to get new habits and build on that. And then the other thing, what Vida mentioned, is what we're putting in our bodies. We
Hmm.
know that so many of the Americans are overfed and undernourished. 70% of them are eating ultra processed foods every day, and 1 in 2 Americans are obese.
Hmm.
So we know that there's a huge link between obesity and infertility in both men and women. Specifically, men that are obese have close to like no sperm count. So I think there's obviously like the opposite of that is eating real food, focusing on eating the rainbow, avoiding ultra processed food, cooking at
Hmm.
home. There's a ton of research on the Mediterranean diet being a pro fertility food for both men and women.
Mm-hmm.
So we always talk to couples about like, okay, this is your time to start cooking together. And the truth is all of these habits that you are forming as a couple are things that will benefit your children, because this is exactly how you want your children to be eating, right? You have
Mm-hmm.
this like beautiful newborn in the house. You're not going to give them ultra processed food. You're going to go and prioritize organic food. And so just thinking about it, this is like setting the foundation. And from a spiritual perspective, when you change these things in your household, you're also spiritually welcoming a baby, because you're creating space. You're creating that energy in your house that's clean and beautiful for the baby, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, it completely makes sense. But back to that epigenetic genetic mismatch, you're more in alignment with nature, which we're intimately connected to. So life comes from that. I mean, it makes complete sense on so many levels, on a physiological level, but then on a mental, emotional, spiritual level, energetic level, if you will, it makes complete sense to me. So, I mean, something comes to mind where you talk about the statistics of obesity, and obviously it's that tied into metabolic problems and these issues. And isn't, like, what do you think the past few years, hopefully we're coming out of it a bit, but where it's just we overcorrected as a culture, where instead of saying, well, yeah, we should never shame anybody, we should never judge anybody, and of course toxic diet culture harmed a lot of people, but we overcorrected in such a way where we've kind of enabled this problem in a way by not having hard conversations and saying, yeah, we're not shaming you, but we actually are there's no, that whole concept of health at every size doesn't exist when you talk about many different issues, especially fertility, right?
Yeah. And we know that the number one cause of infertility in women is PCOS. And
Mm-hmm.
the root of PCOS, I mean, it's a very complex hormonal issue, but the root of it is insulin resistance, which, you can obviously overcome with diet and lifestyle changes. We also have been seeing this trend of Ozempic babies, which I'm sure you've heard of. And we're not here to say, like, if you want to have a baby, get yourself on an Ozempic regimen. But what we do know is that when you are able to focus on your metabolism and really align your body from that perspective, we are seeing higher fertility rates. So I think that's huge. And then going into sugar, there are a ton of sugar studies and fertility. We see that when men and women drink just one sugar beverage a day, we see in women a 19% decline in fertility, and in men a 22% decline in fertility. So these aren't just like stats to shame people who like to drink Coca-Cola. It's just the statistics. And this is a Harvard study. So I think, from just to kind of go back to what we were saying, so there's what we're consuming, there's the environment, and then there's the stress, which we know is the big one. And we know that from an evolutionary perspective, when you're in fight or flight, your body is not going to prioritize reproduction.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think they're going to, they're going to prioritize running away from that
Survival.
tiger.
Yeah.
Nowadays, it's like every day we're in this fight or flight. So how can we, stress is not going to go away. So how can we make it manageable? What are the things that we could do to kind of get out of that fight or flight mode? How can we have more boundaries with work, with just, even our friends, our family, have more balance, maybe get into more of a gratitude state. We know, we didn't talk about our journal, but we have a manifestation journal that we give to every single couple that subscribes to WeNatal. And in that journal, there's daily gratitude prompts. And we know now that like gratitude actually changes your physiology.
Yeah.
And it's not just this woo-woo idea of like, but there is a mind-body connection, and there's a body-mind connection. And it's two-way. And so I think figuring out the stress component is a big one.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah. So the gratitude's a great tool. Start to clean up your life from a toxin standpoint. Are there specific? We talked a lot about fertility depleters. What are your favorite fertility boosters that we haven't talked about so far?
Yeah, I think some of mine that I learned on this journey and wish I had sooner. Some of the most fundamental things in your house that you're probably not even thinking of. Start with the water and the air. So the clean water you're drinking, make sure you're prioritizing a great quality water filter. For the air, open up the windows. It's proven that the air outside is cleaner than the air in your home. Invest in some house plants that are giving us oxygen. There's such low-hanging fruit. Many of them don't cost a lot, but can dramatically affect like
Hmm.
your home environment. That's going to help. Ronit already mentioned like the kitchen and bathroom being probably two of the most toxic areas. So things that boost our fertility is really cleaning those two areas up, from the oils we use to the pans we use, the cutting boards and all of that. I'm sure your audience is very familiar with this. And then the things that I mentioned, not sitting all day. Movement is so key. I've been trying to do these little, like walk between meetings, take a walking meeting. We try to commit to 1 or 2 Zooms a day that we take on a walk. I think with fertility, also, some of the things that typically are very good for you could be not always optimal for fertility, like working out too hard or depleting yourself, whether that's through workouts, through stress, and all that. And so it's honestly the number one advice is also going inward a little and being intuitive. I think a lot of times we dismiss and we just drink more coffee if we're tired, or we, like, but really listening to your body was not something I really understood until my health took a toll. Sleep, we've talked about, is my favorite thing to talk about because it is the foundation of your immune system. And one of our medical advisory boards said in the fertility stage, I recommend sleep even over working out. It's that important to the restorative process and making sure your body can repair and take on. I mean, we know creating a human is a lot of work for your body. And so you want to really invest in your body as if you were planting a fruit in the soil. You wouldn't put it in dirt. You would put it in the most organic, nutrient dense soil to
Mm,
get the best fruit. And that's essentially what we want to treat our bodies as.
yeah.
And I just want to add one more thing.
Sure.
One thing that I specifically did before conceiving, after my miscarriage and before conceiving Emma at the age of 42, is I did acupuncture.
Mm,
Acupuncture twice a week. And I did that for 3 months. And I think it reduces inflammation, it promotes blood flow. And there's actually a lot of science that shows that acupuncture supports male and female fertility.
yeah. Not that we didn't use this for fertilities per se, but I've told this story maybe once or twice on the podcast that our traditional Chinese medicine doctor, doctor of Oriental medicine, acupuncturist from a lineage in Korea, she she's told us within weeks after conception, before a test could even show, it was very, very, very early on, before a pregnancy test could show, she not only told us we were pregnant, my wife and I, but she could tell the gender from the traditional Chinese medicine. And you'd think, okay, it's a 50-50. Maybe she was just guessing. She did 2 for 2 when we were pregnant with my son and pregnant with my daughter.
Wow.
She told us like a week or two after conception and the gender. Science cannot explain this, but there's some ancient medicine where good diagnosticians, I mean, right? TCM's been around for thousands and thousands of years. They just honed this art, right? It's wild, right? I mean, beyond the benefits of acupuncture, the diagnosis aspect of a good TCM doctor is pretty amazing.
We agree. And I feel like so much of today's day and age is about like biohacking and buying all the things and like all the equipment and the technology. But really, it's going back to some of the ancestral things that worked. It was so
Yeah.
exciting back then when we could literally focus on ancient medicines and wisdom, herbs, spices. I think so much of that is kind of dismissed these days, but a lot of our like grandmothers' like traditions
Yeah.
actually work. And that's a perfect example.
Yeah, I
That's
love
so
it.
cool. It's a goosebump story.
I know, it's so unreal. And beyond just that, which is just whatever. It's not as big of a deal as fertility, but I have seen it also with telehealth patients. It'd be a wonderful tool, acupuncture, to support fertility as well. I agree with you. I'd love to go down some of these myths, and I want you to debunk them, give me context, because many people believe them, and we're gonna set the record straight. Are you guys up for this?
Do it.
Okay.
Yes, we're up for it.
First myth, geriatric pregnancies, 35 or older for women, which everybody that's 35 was like, wait, what? Geriatric pregnancies, 35 years or older for women, are too old to get pregnant or too dangerous. What say you?
First of all, I just want to say I think I'm going to make it my life's mission to abolish the word geriatric pregnancy. It's such a negative connotation to any woman going through their journey, and it's unnecessary. First of all, majority of us are having kids later in life.
Yeah.
Like you've heard
Damn,
both
35. I'm
is
like 35 is a baby in my opinion.
I feel like that term needs to be changed, and the age, because I think the mental aspect being so huge, and I have so many friends who use that term and got in their heads and started to create this whole narrative. So no, we know tons of people, including both of us, who've had kids much later in life, healthy babies through natural conception. And I think it's important to share the story because there's a lot of terms and ancient information that's not serving us. And so just know Ronit's story is even goosebumps, natural conception and baby at 42.
Yeah. So with my first, I had her at 38, and my second, I had her at 42. And both of those were natural, doing all the things that we talked about. And after my miscarriage before I had Emma, I leveled up all of my nutrients. I leveled up my husband's nutrients. I did the acupuncture twice a week, and I got pregnant on my first try at the age of 41. Wow. Now, my fertility doctor friends will say that's a medical miracle. But I will say, no, it's actually not a miracle. And maybe there was a little bit of luck and magic involved. But when you work on supporting your health and your egg quality, so much can take place. And then the other thing is, I'm sure your audience knows the biggest difference between biological age and chronological age. And back when I was 41, I checked my telomeres and I was 32. So you could be 41 and be aging like a 32-year-old, and you could be 20 years old and be aging like a 60-year-old. Yeah. So it's all about the diet and lifestyle. And I don't think that it's, ever too late. So busting that myth, no, over 35 is not too old to get pregnant. Over 40 is not too old to get pregnant.
Great. All right. Myth or truth? You're born with all of the eggs that you have, and there's nothing you can do to improve your egg quality. Myth or truth?
50-50.
Well, 50-50. Part of that is true, and part of that is a myth. You are born with all the eggs that you'll ever have, but there is so much that you could do to improve your egg quality, because we talk about quality over quantity. Yes, as you age, your quantity of eggs goes down 100%. Women do have a biological clock from that perspective. But what ages in your eggs is actually your mitochondria. And if you work on supporting your mitochondria, you can improve your egg quality no matter what your age is. And so by taking nutrients like CoQ10 and NAC, you can optimize your egg quality. And the 3 months before you ovulate is the golden window, because that is when your eggs are essentially maturing. And that is the most important time to ensure that the chromosomes are splitting correctly. So making sure that you have the right battery, the mitochondria to the cell, making sure that the battery is charged will ensure that those chromosomes split correctly. And then you will have lower chances of chromosomal abnormalities, which is what usually causes miscarriage.
Got it. Yeah, the mitochondrial health, you mentioned CoQ10, which is N-acetylcysteine as well. What are your any other nutrients or foods or things to focus on for mitochondrial health?
Yeah, we actually just launched an Egg Quality Plus product, and it's amazing, and it's 5 nutrients in one product, and it's the 5 nutrients that we were taking to level up our egg quality:
Amazing.
CoQ10, N-acetylcysteine, L-carnitine,
Yeah.
PQQ, which actually generates new mitochondria,
Yeah.
and alpha lipoic acid, which kind of reduces inflammation and
Yeah.
supports the whole ecosystem over there.
Blood sugar regulation. Yeah. All right, great. I love this. This is fun. Okay, myth or truth? Next one. Men don't have a fertility clock. True or false?
False. Yeah, I know it's perceived that men can have kids till they're 100, and we see celebrities like Mick Jagger and all them having kids in their late 70s and 80s. But the truth is, they also have a biological clock the same way we do. And, as we see them aging, so men in their mid 30s and 40s do experience a 25% decline in fertility compared to men in their mid 20s. So there is something happening where they're not immune to also the environment we're living in, the toxicity. And as they age, there is an increased likelihood of certain chronic diseases in their offspring. And so while they might be able to produce, perhaps maybe the child could be at risk of certain, uh, genetic diseases. So yeah.
So one note on that, 1 out of 5 couples that go through IVF, their partner isn't even checked.
Wow.
So think about that. If we know that men's sperm essentially ages and could contain DNA damage as they age, how are they not, they're just like grabbing that sperm. And so I
Yeah.
think it's a big thing for men to be aware and just be proactive before you have any fertility issues. Take a good quality prenatal for women and for men. And for men, we know that when men take antioxidants like CoQ10, NAC, similar to how we're improving egg quality, we can improve fertility outcomes, and men have a 4 times higher chance of getting their partner pregnant if they take high dose antioxidants,
Amazing.
zinc, vitamin C, all of the things.
Wonderful. So that was going to be my next question. Is you mentioned guys maybe having a slight advantage in improving sperm quality, maybe faster, quicker
Yeah.
quicker turnaround, and moving the needle. In many cases, any other nutrients that these similar nutrients, antioxidants to support sperm health? Any other call outs you'd like to point out here?
I would say folate is a big one. So folate, not folic acid, for both men and women. So folic acid is usually, used, it's the synthetic form of folate. It's a
Mm-hmm.
B vitamin, and it helps support reduce DNA damage. And there was actually a 2018 study done on 30 couples that had the MTHFR genetic mutation, and they were given, I believe it was 600 milligrams of folate, both of them. All of these couples were struggling with infertility for 4 years. And after 3 months on folate, 13 of them got pregnant. So B vitamins are crucial for fertility for both men and women, which is why it's in both of our prenatals for both men and women.
Got it. All right. Next myth: supplements are just expensive urine, right? I mean, it's expensive pee, right? They don't have to take, and especially if
I,
someone's eating good food, that's what people will say. Well, I'm eating healthy food. Why do I have to supplement with
Yeah, I feel
stuff?
like I'll take that one. It is false because I do think there was a time where that was true. Like maybe in our grandparents' generation where our soils were super rich of nutrients and minerals and all that. But we know now today our soils are depleted of all the key nutrients that we need. And so the similarity here is that, in our grandparents' generation, eating one orange is the equivalent to eating 8 oranges today. I'm sure you've heard the analogy. It's
Yeah.
wild. So you think
Yeah.
even if you are eating organic, clean, a great diet, supplementation is still needed to kind of help with those nutrient stores and everything that we're missing in our diet. Much less knowing that also the Americans are not necessarily average American eating the cleanest organic diet, and in fact 60-70% of our food is like processed or highly processed foods, which we know is not helping our fertility. And so there is a long way to go, and we just think it's like the easiest insurance policy to start building those nutrient stores and for both partners to also a great multi is something we should both be on no matter what stage in life. And I'm sure your audience gets that more than anything.
Yeah, for sure. Next myth or fact, let me know. All prenatals are created equal. They just see the prenatal section, pick the cheapest one. They're all the same. What's your thought?
Huge myth. We would have never gone into the supplement space. Never in a million years did we think we'd be like in a supplement business. But they're not all the same. I think a recent study in the American Journal of Clinical Nutrition showed that 90% of pregnant women are not getting enough nutrients, and that over 90% of the prenatals on the market don't even contain enough dosages and nutrients that are needed for fertility. And these nutrients are crucial, Will. Choline, let's use choline as an example. Choline is shown to support baby brain development, and WeNatal has 400 milligrams of choline. Research shows that when you're pregnant, you need 450 milligrams, and on average, women are eating 150 milligrams. So we put 400 in there because, if you're vegan, if, whatever it may be, and you have prenatals on the market that completely don't even have iron in them, choline in them, and or that have like 50 milligrams. So the dosages matter, making sure that it's comprehensive. WeNatal has 24 key ingredients, and I wouldn't take one nutrient out. There are some prenatals out there that have 12 nutrients. They are so important for baby's health. We can't stress that enough. Iron, vitamin D, critical. And so, from a high level, prenatals are not all the same. And it's very important, and I'm sure you tell this to your telehealth patients all the time. Make sure that you're taking supplements that are third-party tested, because they're not regulated by the FDA. So you want an external agency coming and telling you, does the label have the dosages? Does it have the dosages that are listed on the label? Does it have heavy metals in it? Does it have bacterial contamination? So you want to make sure that the companies that you're working with and that the supplement that you're taking are of integrity. And what we always tell people is email the brand and ask them to send you the third-party testing documents, because we send it to anybody who asks right away. And some brands say they're third-party testing, but then you never see those documents. So it's very important. So making sure that it's comprehensive, making sure, that it's clean, the additional ingredients, that it doesn't have a bunch of fillers and junk and colors in it. And
This is
they're
great.
not all the same.
They're not all the same. And you've done the work. You get the third-party testing. That's what I love what you're doing. I could talk to you both for hours about this, but I won't. I know we all have things to do after this. But let's jump into the art of being well. At the end of every episode, the podcast is called The Art of Being Well. We have your Art of Being Well. We have Ronit and Vida's Art of Being Well. You both can just throw out the answer, whatever comes to mind. First question is, what is the worst, nastiest tasting food that you eat? You don't do it for the taste. You do it for the supportive health benefits.
Damn, that's a good one. I would take things like liver.
Yeah.
I'm not a big meat person, to be honest, but I do know that eating meat is super important for overall health and fertility. So for me, I do that one for my health. The beef protein powders.
Yeah.
Grossed out by it, but I do it for my health.
Yeah.
How about you, Vida?
Similar. I think I've gotten into steak. I haven't been a huge steak eater, but again, we're really prioritizing protein and good meats and all that. I don't also gravitate towards it, but we're pushing ourselves. So.
Yeah. Hey,
Similar.
good answer. Organ meats definitely up there for sure. Do you have and people will say, okay, I know you're telling me, Dr. Cole, to have liver. Is there any way that you get it down easier, that like the taste is more palatable maybe?
The liver. I actually took desiccated liver in capsules for a very long time. When I wasn't eating any meat, because I think it's so important. And so that's for me, swallowing pills.
Yeah.
get it down.
The other way, I come from a Persian family, and a lot of it is like slow cooked meats and stews are very prevalent in our culture. And
Yes,
so I
that
find
hides
that
the
if I
taste.
mush the meats and like it's in a veggie broth and all of that, it slow cooked it like takes the texture out of it and
Yeah.
grosses it out a little bit less. And so that for me, like the slow cooked broths and stews really make it digestible.
You can totally hide things. You can hide the taste in a good
Totally.
soup, right? I mean, just depending on
Exactly.
what you put in there. All right,
Exactly.
next question is, what is for both of you the most out of the box, unconventional, weirdest thing? And I know weird is relative around our parts of the world, but what's the weirdest thing that you've done for your wellness that you're willing to admit on a podcast?
Hmm. The weirdest thing. Interesting. Oh, I mean, I did the yoni steams back in the day
Yeah,
when they were like very trendy. I think Gwyneth probably
yeah,
was the one who brought it to the forefront. So I've done those at like a Korean spa.
Mine aren't that weird. I mean, I got on the crazy health kick. I was doing IVs, cold plunges, the saunas. I mean, I wouldn't call them weird, but I was like very religious about it, and it really transformed my health. We also both invested in therapeutic saunas where we can have our head out, but like get red
yeah,
light. So
yeah.
we're into all that stuff. I don't think any nowadays, and I feel like living in LA, nothing's weird anymore because
No.
you're like
I
in the
mean,
wellness central where everyone's biohacking and everyone's doing
I
it
was gonna say like breath work, but it's like, is breath work weird? Like breath
anymore.
work is amazing.
Yeah.
I know.
So
I know.
Nothing's weird anymore. I think maybe a couple of years ago would have gotten more flack.
Yeah, totally, totally. What's some place that you've both have been to? It could be different places that you would recommend. Oh, man, this has to be on people's bucket list. It's a magical place.
mm. For me, I would say Israel. I grew up in Israel, and it's an amazing place where just beautiful beaches, amazing food, and biggest thing of all, community and family is everything. And, I think in the wellness space, oftentimes we hear people saying, like, community, we're building community, but like that is ingrained in the culture. And when you
Hmm.
go there as a tourist, as a visitor, like you feel it. And I think that is so therapeutic.
Love it.
Yeah,
I bet
I
you, Vida.
agree. My honeymoon had two parts. It was Israel and Italy, and both of them, she already took Israel, but Italy also had that same. It was my first and only time there. But from a food and culture and family, like you feel something, and you feel also a more um, just like care towards the aging and care towards family culture and some things that you just don't see as much maybe in the US. And it
Hmm.
was like lovely being there. And as a carb lover, I mean, I felt the food was so much more real there, and you're walking so much more, and just quality of life felt so prioritized, and it was lovely.
Love it. Do either of you know what Enneagram you are? Like the personality test? I ask everybody this, and very few people know. So don't feel any shame if you don't know.
I
I
don't
don't.
know.
Oh man, I need to quit asking people this because it's like doesn't land well. But I never like give up. I'm relentless in seeing.
I love that.
Yeah.
Is it a
Anyways,
personality type?
yes, yes, yes. There's a 1 to 9. Like, there's
Oh,
numbers 1 to 9, and I just like as I'm talking, get to know people. It's just interesting to know.
no, you have to
Anyways,
send us a
I'll
link before
send
the
it. Yeah,
podcast.
exactly. I'll send it and put it in the show notes. Like
I
what
love it.
Enneagram you are. What's on the going on like the world travel self care on that sort of vein? What's some place that you haven't been to that's on your bucket list?
Mm.
Oh,
I was just hearing about Japan from a few friends and hearing what an amazing culture it is and what a clean place it is and how the food is such an art, and there's like this slow food movement over there, and everything is kind of like at a like slower pace. And I think for me, visiting a place where like things are a little slower because I'm like go 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 would be incredible.
Yeah.
I've been to Japan. It is amazing. I would say Thailand. Recently, I've heard a lot of stories, and I've had some friends go. Um, Also, talking about self-care. One of my friends in our community was getting massages every single day for a very inexpensive cost, and like really, like there was a whole wellness world that he talked about there. And so, I also think to Ronit's point, it is slower, and life is just a bit anytime you get a chance to really go international and separate yourself from your everyday, it's a new appreciation. So I just recently heard about Thailand. That's a bucket list for me.
Love it. What is a book that you've read? It could be fiction or nonfiction. I'm getting this running Art of Being Well book club going, and that you think we should add to the list.
Oh, we love Dr. Dr. Casey Means Good Energy.
Yes, so good.
She's a friend and she's incredible, our huge inspiration daily.
And then the new one is Kathy Heller's Abundant Ever After. Just launched about like a week ago, and it's so in line with so much of the spiritual work I've been doing, and I'm very excited. I'm like just starting it now, and it's a very good read.
So cool. Amazing book. I'll put the episodes. Casey's been on the podcast twice. I'll put it in the show notes for people to listen to it. But yeah, she's wonderful, right? And of course, I didn't know you knew her, so now it makes complete sense.
Casey's amazing.
And
we're going tonight. She's like my neighbor.
Oh my gosh! Tell her I love her, and we'll see each other soon. I hope. My friend, tell people where to go. Tell people where to go to learn about all the things that you all are doing.
Our website, WeNatal.com. And on social, we're mostly active on Instagram at @we_natal. And then for any of your listeners who want to get started, don't know where to start, we have a free guide, WeNatal.com/guide, with 9 tips for how to kind of optimize your conception. And also DM us, email us, care@WeNatal. We love supporting people. We love, I give people my phone number. And really, like, if anybody is going through something, we're here for you. So feel free to reach out and use this as a resource.
Love it. Ronit, Vida, this has been great. Thanks for coming on the podcast.
Thank you.